So this is a mimer from the Rebbe from 1988, and yeah, we'll let it speak for itself. Here we go. V'ata berechamecha rabim. This is a quote from the insert that we say in the Chanuka Shmona Esrei. Right, we add this prayer, and it says, "You in your great mercy, amarta lehem beis tarasam. You stood for them at the time of their trouble, etc." And then it says, "Masarti giburim biyad chalashim." You gave over the mighty in the hands of the weak, v'rabim biyad ma'atim, and the many in the hands of the few, etc. This is a portion of the Nusach of Al Anisi. So he says, my father-in-law is exacting, but my maro divra maschil zeh, in his mimer it starts with the same title as ours. The Rebbe says it was said exactly 50 years before he said his, which is a big deal. Every time there's a 50-year Yovel, it would be usually marked. So the Rebbe says in his mimer that ours is based on Hari Ikar Aneis, the Chanuka, who Aneis the Nitzachon Milchama. Seemingly, the main miracle of Chanuka was the victory in war. Right, because this is basically this Ata Barachamecha Rabim, this statement that we just said in Al Anisim is essentially talking about the war, right? You gave over the might in the hands of the weak and the many in the hands of the few. It's talking about the miraculous victory over the Greeks that took place. And when was that war completed? That was on the 24th of Kislev. When did Hanukkah start? The 25th of Kislev. So his question is, here in Hanukkah, we're mentioning, right, the every day, all 8 days, in the blessing Al Anisim, this miraculous victory, which was on the 24th, and seemingly that was the main miracle, right? Because if you didn't win the war, what's a little jar of oil going to do for you? He says, and not only was it going to do for you, but if you didn't win the war, then there wouldn't be the jar of oil. Right, this was the cause of the finding of the jar of oil, and that was on the 25th of Kislev. The Gemara states, because a quote from the Gemara here in Shabbos, because it says that when the house of Chashmonai, right, the temporary kings of Israel that sort of took over in this time, when they overpowered the Greeks, and conquered them. As dafka matzu pachachat shel shemen. Then, specifically after the war was won, they found one jar of oil. That's something we see openly from the Gemara. And nasibones, and a miracle happened with this jar. And we lit it for 8 days. So the question is, the leading question here, lama kavu techilas yemei Chanukah b'chaf he b'kislev. And that, if that's the case, why did they establish that the first day of Chanukah should be the 25th of Kislev? Which the 25th was the miracle of the lights, finding the jar. Why didn't they establish anything to be on the 24th of Kislev, which is really seemingly the cause of all the other miracles, and in a certain sense, it is clearly the biggest miracle. You're talking about a handful of, literally a small handful, you can count them on your hands, of untrained soldiers somehow defeating the entire empire of the day in a battle. That is the major miracle. And it's not even, okay, we do mention it in Ba'al Anisim, but it's not part of the holiday, that whole thing. And this is the question of the Frierdiker Rebbe in his memoirs. Why is there nothing on the 24th to denote this? L'chaim. Yaakov, I have a copy for you here. All right. Everyone got the question? Yes. Yesh Lomar. So we could say, this that he's so exacting in the mimer. Hatam al shekavu Chanukah b'chaf he b'kislev below b'chaf dali b'kislev. The reason why we have the holiday starting on the 25th, not the 24th. V'delo kadiak b'kama drushim. This is a little bit tricky. Follow what he's saying here, right? The Frierdiker Rebbe is making this point, right? That it starts on the 25th and then on the 24th. And he's exacting in this way, but not like other Maimarim, other Drushim that are also exacting. Including other Hasidic Maimarim that start with the exact same words. When they ask, Madua kavu Chanukah al nes depach Hashem and velo al nes de nitzachon milchama, they also ask, why wasn't the miracle or the holiday established on the miracle of the war and only on the miracle of the oil? Who keep a drushim now? It's because in those drushim, kaila hashita, they are based and established according to the opinion shayom tov de Chanukah nikva rak al nes haneros. That the Yom Tov of Chanukah is only established. There's only one miracle that Chanukah is there to celebrate, and that is the miracle of the oil. V'lechein medayek, and therefore in those maimarim, they are exacting, and they ask, Shluchura ikar hu nitzachon milchama. They ask over there, wait a second, seemingly, why are you leaving out the victorious war? V'lama asuma tafel ikar ma ikar tafel, and those maimarim therefore ask, why are you making from the main thing something minor, and from the minor thing something major? Okay, does anyone understand what I just said?
Yes.
Please do.
In the other mimers of the same topic, where they even have the same introductory statements, and they talk about the same issue with the war and the miracle, they always seem to point that the main miracle is Chanukah and the lights, right?
But that's the same thing as ours, right? We're also pointing that out. What's the difference between those memorim and ours?
We're saying that it's important that the war was the main miracle.
They're also asking that question. No, it's the same question. That's why I wanted to repeat it, make sure everyone got it. There's the drushas over there who ask the same question, and they say, why are you making here you go, what's called the ikar tafel and the tafel ikar, which means the main thing you're making it minor, and the minor thing you're making it major, right? You're making a big deal about the candles and not about the war. We're saying that, and they're saying it. What's the difference between our mimer and those maimarim? Is that in those maimarim they are guided according to the shita, the opinion that the holiday of Chanukah was only established for the miracle of the lights, not at all for the war. In other words, whereas we're going to see in a second, there's two opinions, right? When it comes to the Rishonim, what are we celebrating on Chanukah? There's two opinions. Some say we're celebrating two things, right? We're celebrating the war against the Greeks that was won, and we're celebrating the miracle of the lights. Some say we're only celebrating one thing, i.e., who are the some? Those other Maimarim that we're now discussing. They say there's no establishment of the Chanukah for the war at all. There's only establishing a holiday of Chanukah for the miracle of lights. In those Maimarim, where they have that opinion that Chanukah is only for lights, they say, how can you leave out the war entirely, right? Why are you making the lights, which is seemingly secondary, the main thing? That's the holiday, and the war, which is the main reason for the lights, you're not even adding it into Chanukah. Whereas we are saying, no, we're under the opinion that the miracle of the holiday of Chanukah, was predicated and founded to commemorate two miracles, both the winning of the war and the miracle of the lights. So we are holding that there's a reason for Chanukah also includes the war. So therefore we're asking, right, that if that's the case, that we already believe that Chanukah is there to celebrate the war. In fact, this is the reason, as you're going to soon see, that we say Al Anisim. Where every day of Chanukah we do mention that you gave over the many in the hands of the few and the strong in the hands of the weak. So that's because we're honoring and commemorating the winning of the war. So therefore it's almost how much more so, why didn't you start Chanukah on the 24th? Right? Because if you anyway believe that Chanukah is also about the war, it should be included in like the day of the victory should be included in the holiday. So it's a slight difference. You understand what's going on there? Okay.
It's clear now.
Okay, so now he's going to say it himself inside. The Maimer Zeh, in our Maimer, and the Maimerim that the Frierdiker Rebbe makes this calculation on, the ones that this is particularly based on, we are holding by the guiding principle that the holiday of Chanukah is also established for the miracle of the victory in war. And that's what I was just mentioning, that's mainly why we say Al Anisim, right? In other words, we light candles on Chanukah to commemorate and celebrate the miracle of the lights. But we say Al Hanisim on Chanukah because we are under the opinion that we're also celebrating the victory. And that's how we celebrate it, by saying Al Hanisim, which mentions the weak and the mighty and so forth. Yeah, and how do you thank God for the miracle of the lights? This is because you do it by lighting lights, right? By lighting candles. And therefore, in our mimer, where the Frierdiker Rebbe is making this exacting point, where we are holding that there's two reasons for the miracle of Chanukah. Chanukah is this, that these days of Chanukah, which is also established lechatchila for commemorating a victory in war. And on the contrary, seemingly the winning of the war is the main miracle. Because again, like if you're gonna, compare miracles, you have an entire. Imagine if like the seven of us in this room were like, all right, we're gonna just go ahead and take down America. Let's do it. Right, and we did it. Right, that would be, and then we found some lights and some oil and had some donuts. And it was like, but like that's crazy, right? Like that's exactly what happened. It was mamish like a small band of untrained men that took down the entire Greek war and empire and elephants and everything. What's that?
I'm on board. When do we?
Yeah, careful. This is being recorded. Who knows what they're going to come after us now? So, and not only was the war a bigger miracle, arguably, but it was also the reason why they found the jar of oil. If they hadn't won the war, they never would have found the jar. The whole thing wouldn't have gotten going. Therefore, the question is, why does Chanukah matchilim b'chaf hei b'kislev? Why does it only start on the 25th of Kislev, Shabo haneros, where we had the miracle of the lights, v'lo b'chav daled b'kislev, and not on the 24th when the main miracle seemingly happened? So again, we're just saying this. It's a stark question, no matter how you look at it. Arguably, it's even a stronger question if you're holding the opinion that Chanukah itself is there to commemorate the war. In which case, really, we just like left the whole thing out. It should have started on the 24th. Got it?
Yeah.
L'chaim.
Can't have a 9-day holiday.
What's that?
Can't have a 9-day holiday.
Interesting. We have Simchas Torah. And 2 days of Simchas Torah.
In diaspora, yeah.
Okay. Well, now after this, you're going to realize we do have a 9-day holiday. Base is a little tiny chapter base, right? But it's a very short mimer. We could probably finish this in a couple of days. But there's plenty of Chanukah fun ahead.
Finish it by Chanukah.
What's that?
We'll finish it by Chanukah.
Hopefully. Well, the idea is we want to finish it by the 24th of Chanukah. So unlike most of the Jewish world, we can actually celebrate the 24th as need be. 24th of Shabbos? Even better. Mamshich ba'maimer. So the Frierdiker Rebbe continues in his mimer. That when it comes to the you know what? They were told me to put this up higher. There we go. We're higher. That in the miracle of the oil itself, there was actually two miracles in one. What was it? The one is that they found one jar of pure oil which was sealed with the seal of the Kohen Gadol. That itself was a miracle, right? Because we know that the Greeks entered into the Heichel and they deliberately contaminated all the oil, right? That's also like a subject of great conversation, is that it shows on how much of a spiritual war this is, because they didn't come in and destroy the jars of oil. They just came in and opened them all up. And not just in the Beis HaMikdash, but in all the Yerushalayim, right? Because they couldn't find any pure oil in the Heichel. So let's see if someone else has some around town, right? And nobody had any, because like part of the Greek interest here was not to destroy, but just to contaminate all the oil in Jerusalem, right? So finding, and that was there was a big giant army. That was their intent. It's like, let's go matame all these Jews' oil. It's a topic for another time. It was a crazy mission that they had. And the idea is that finding one jar, therefore, was in fact an absolute miracle, because they went out of their way to contaminate every single aspect of oil they could find. And it was not only found, it was underground, sealed with the Kohen Gadol's signet, which means it was 100% good. Now that miracle, and I'm emphasizing how much of a miracle it was, right? So much so that they established Chanukah on the finding of that oil alone. We talk about the idea of the miraculous length of the lasting of the of the oil, right? That it lasted for 8 days. And that's seemingly the big miracle, but actually it's not. When they established Hanukkah, they didn't establish it seemingly on the miraculous continuation of the burning. That's why he's pointing out. It was a miracle in its own right, and a groisa miracle to the point that they established Hanukkah on this miracle, that they found the oil alone, right? And when did they find it? On the 25th of Kislev. Thus, they established the first day of Hanukkah. Now, the second miracle, which obviously is a major duty miracle, that it only had enough to light for 1 day, and they lit it for 8 days. When did that miracle really start? Seemingly, only the next day. Because lighting it the first day, they had enough for 1 day. So, even though we're going to learn maybe a sikha after this, that there was a miraculous nature even in the first day of the lighting. But brass tacks, right? The reality is they found enough oil to light for 1 day, and therefore to say that all of a sudden it continued to light, that miracle was really on the next day, right? The 26th of Kislev. And therefore the Frierdiker Rebbe has another question. Why don't we find there's like some extra Jewish minhag on the 26th of Kislev, Haspakas Hashem and Lishmona Yamim, where we find that begins like the ultimate miracle, seemingly the miracle which completely breaks nature in every way, that the one jar lasted for 8 days, and we don't find. So it's a double-pronged question. On one hand, the main miracle seems to be the war, and we do nothing, right? And then on the other hand, if you want to say the main supernatural miracle, I mean, they're all supernatural, but at least the war, there was someone fighting, right? The idea that this light lasts for 8 days just completely breaks all the rules of nature without any qualms about it. And that's on the 26th specifically, not on the 25th. And there's nothing there either. So it seems like the two major miracles here are not really mentioned in the book, right? Yeah, and only this finding of the oil, which is on the 25th, that's the only one that they actually fixed the holiday for.
It sounds like they established, because you said they established Hanukkah on the 25th, because they're like, oh, it's a miracle. Mm-hmm. We have like this jar of oil. We can light for 1 day.
Exactly.
And then like the oil continues the next day, and then like, we have this 8-day holiday because of it.
Right. So they made an 8-day holiday, but there should be seemingly something to, commemorate the true uniqueness of it, besides just there being 8 days.
When do we start adding more lights? We don't add more lights on the first day.
Officially, right, Al Pi Halach, you don't have to actually add more lights. In the sense that you can be yotzi with 1 light each night. That's like the main mitzvah. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. But the adding of the lights is called a mahadrin, right? Doing it mahadrin, meaning mahadrin. You could light Hanukkah just lighting 1 candle each night, right? For each member of the household, whatever it might be. There's different shittas and opinions on it. But so if you want to say we add another candle, maybe you could say that's a type of commemoration. But it's again, it's a minhag, and it's not necessarily unique to that day, right? In other words, it's sort of just the way the whole Hanukkah is played out. Where's something that's like showing me that this specific day we should commemorate this miracle?
We should start the big donuts in the Chanuka oil.
Okay, we're gonna put that up to a vote when the Sanhedrin comes back. All right. Anyway, these are the questions. I actually like your answer. Maybe there's somewhat of a commemoration, but the Rebbe doesn't think it's good enough. Yeah, I'm just seeing if he mentions what you said. Okay, in the footnotes. Okay, so Gimel. Nekudas abir bezeba maimer. So the point of explanation that the Frierdiker Rebbe brings out, right, because many of the Rebbe's maimers are basically a explanation of his father-in-law's maimers, and so is this one, so he's continuously referring back to it. And he says the point of explanation over there, Israel is waiting for the lights to come on. So he says over there that the winning of the war is what we call Yichuda Tata, right? It's connected with this divine service called the lower unification. What is a lower unification? It's basically, if you think about the notion of the job of the Jewish people is that we're supposed to do something to unite the world and God, right? That's kind of the whole purpose of creation, is that this can come from above or from below. And when it comes from below, it means it's our best attempt to bring these two things together. Since we are trapped, as it were, inside of our self experience of self and independence, there's no way to ultimately unite this dimension with God in a way where the dimension itself ceases to be and there's only one, because we're stuck with our sense of self. But we can at least perform rites and do things which honors and makes it clear that we recognize that we have a source. So we bind ourselves to our source in a way which is called the lower unity, which basically keeps our existence in place, but it's sort of our best attempt to connect ourselves with Hashem, versus someone who's just not interested in that job. He goes running around keeping this world in a state of separateness, right? So it's called the lower unity. And what the Frierdiker Rebbe says is that the war that they won was a demonstration of this lower unity, right? But I guess the idea is that, it was within the natural realm, and they were taking upon themselves arms. In other words, it wasn't something which broke the rules of nature. Obviously, the victory was something which broke the rules of nature. But their attempt to fight this war, it's not that different than you fighting your Nefesh Bahamas. You also have a big, massive Greek empire inside of your head, right? And he's much stronger than you. He's like all of academia, right, basically. And if you're going to take him on, even though in a certain sense, if you would win, that would be miraculous. But the process of taking that on is called the lower unity, because you're basically just still experiencing yourself as separate, and you're battling, other ideas in your head, whatever it might be. So this is called the lower unity. Sorry, and then the Frierdiker Rebbe explains that finding the jar of oil on the 25th was a demonstration of the higher unity. Right? Why is that? He's going to explain all this inside, but can anyone think why that would be a demonstration of the higher unity? Based on what we just said, first of all, what is the higher unity? Can someone give me poor man's definition of that?
Is that from above to below? It's the opposite of what you were saying.
Meaning what? What does that look like?
The supernatural is the supernal. Divine. Miracles, Sadiqim, Torah. Yeah.
So basically, what's going on there is there's still world and man, world and God, and you're trying to unite them. But who's doing the uniting, right? Not us from our sort of clumsy perspective, but it comes from above. That there's like sort of an overtaking of divinity over the world, and that would be finding this jar of oil, because it's the idea of finding it means it obviously was something sort of placed there by divine miracle. It's something which shows that there was an interaction from above, right, which was like discovered by us, and it was a miracle, right? Like, as I said, they went out of their way according to nature to contaminate everything. So finding it was sort of like a gift from above, right?
It makes sense. That's kind of like a above from below and from above kind of miracle.
What, the oil itself?
Just finding it. Because the Jews had to actually do something like that to go out and look for it.
So in a sense, what you're saying there is there's still an aspect of the world, right? That's what I was saying also. There's still a unification of two things. It's just that the main party is not like us fighting a war. The human contribution is less, and the God contribution is more. So it's a unification of above to below. There's still two things. Like, I'm agreeing with you. It
makes sense. Like the miracle on the 26th of Kislev would be just purely from above to below, because the Jews, they couldn't do anything to make the candles continue.
So we'll see. What's that one all about? We're going to have to add that in. Anyway, so we have Yehuda Tata, Yehuda Ilah. 24th, 25th, fighting the war, finding the oil. Meanwhile, let's stay on the train. This, that the miracle of fighting the war was on the 24th. And the finding of the oil was on the 25th. Here's a beauty one for you. Ki mispar chav dalid, because the number 24 romez al yechuda tata keneged chav dalid ha'osio shebebaruch shem kavod machuso le'lam ba'ed. It's a geshmak. Why is it? Because the 24, the day called the 24th, is a hint specifically to something called the lower unity, because there's 24 letters in the words Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso Le'olam Va'ed, i.e. like part 2 of the Shema, right? And the Mispar Chav Hey, the number 25, hints to the Yehuda Ilah, because there's 25 letters in the pasuk Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad.
Wow.
Pretty nice. So basically, and if you read the beginning of the second part of the Tanya, Shara Yichud Ve'amuna, he says over there that the introduction, you can look at it. He says that we're going to hear under, and it's called Shara Yichud Ve'amuna. The Shara Yichud means the gate of unifying high and low. And he says we're going to understand how the Shema is Yichud Tata and Baruch Shem Kavod is Yichud Tata. Shema is Yichud Ilah and Baruch Shem is Yichud Tata. Right? That's exactly what those two things are. It's not a stretch. So the idea is that it's almost like Hanukkah was literally made to express this. The 24th is the 24 letters of the lower unity, and the 25th is Shema Yisrael, the 25 letters of the higher unity. And again, this also goes in with the words Shema and Baruch Shem. Because what are you saying when you're saying Shema? You see it? What, found? He's, right? He's saying, what does it say? When you're saying Shema, you're saying Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Which basically is like, you're saying Hashem is one. Right? The Yud Kei Vav Kei element, right? Is essentially beyond nature, that's taking over everything. And what is one, echad, is the idea that, I'm sure you've come across this, that the aleph, dalid, ches, is the one, aleph is Hashem's oneness, and the dalid, or the ches, is the seven heavens and the earth, and the dalid is the four directions, right? And so the whole idea is that the seven heavens and the earth and the four directions are all nullified to the one, the aleph. This is literally what you're supposed to think about by halacha. When you say Shema, that's supposed to run through your mind, right? And the idea is, what are you doing? You're basically saying that all this world is unified inside of the aleph. That's called the Yehuda Ilah, right? And then what is Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso Le'olam Va'ed? Baruch means you're basically in a lower place, and therefore you're asking. Baruch means to draw down, because I am in my separate perspective and reality. But I want to make a yuchad for Hashem. And I'm not in the perspective of Shema Yisrael, because I said Shema Yisrael, and now it's like, that's sort of a higher version. Now let's be realistic. Where am I? I'm in a world where I see myself in creation. So what's the best thing that I can do? We say Baruch Shem. It says there's a mission that says that the Anshe Yerecho, right? There was this people that arguably they were great tzaddikim, or it's a little bit of an interesting story what they are. According to this opinion, they were great tzaddikim, and they said Shema, and they went right into V'ahavta. They didn't say Baruch Shem Kavod, because their Shema brought them to a state of Yehuda Ilah, and that was it. Like, the purpose is to get to a state of Yehuda Ilah. The problem is, if you're not there, you have to then backtrack and say, okay, Baruch Shem. I can at least understand that there's such a thing called Yehuda Ilah, but for me, I have to say Baruch Shem. What is Baruch Shem? I'm going to draw down an aspect of this divinity which I don't see, right, into Shem Kavod Malchuso, which is basically a symbol for the three worlds, Bria Tzir Nasiya, the worlds of Yeshus, right? Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso Leolam, right? Leolam is basically, now I'm in the world. Leolam means to the world, because I don't see the negation of worlds. And then he says in the Tanya, Va'ed is like a gematria type of conversion of the word Echad, right? But instead of saying echad, you can switch the words around to an atbash kind of scenario there into the word va'ed, which means that it's not only atbash, it's a few different devices of switching letters around simultaneously, but whatever it is the idea, it's like a step down from echad. So it's like va'ed, because it's going in li'olam, into the world. In any case, 25, 24, it's right there. So it makes sense that these are aligning with the winning of the war, the lower unity, and the finding of the oil, the higher unity. All right, we're taking it from inside. Last word on the line, 5 lines down from Gimel, is Vahanes. Hanes dasmak shemen l'shmona yami she'aschil b'chav vav b'kislev. Here is Ruvi's pointing out, where does that go in? That seems like that should be sort of Yehudi law, because it's this wondrous miracle beyond nature entirely. He said, what is Chav Vav B'Kislev? Says the Alter Rebbe, Chav Vav is Gematria Havaya. Right? So that has its own sort of like standalone demarcation of something godly. Right? We don't have to search in for how many letters. Everyone knows 26 is Gematria B'Shem Havaya. So you have 24, 25, 26 is all of a sudden like this lead-in. So you have the Yehuda Tata, Yehudi Ilah, and then what's Havaya? Where does that fit in? And he says, Hu L'mayla Gam Yehudi Ilah. Oh, that's why he didn't mention it in the 25th, because it's even above the higher unity.
Wow.
What does it mean to be above the higher unity?
The one with the essence.
Right, above, when you're talking about unity, and that's why I kind of agreed with you when you say when they found the jar of oil, even though the emphasis there is that it comes from above, but you mentioned, well, they had to find it. right? So yeah, so in a certain sense, because we're still recognizing that there's two things, we're just saying that the negation of the lower thing by the higher thing is dramatic, and the idea that like it comes from above, it's entirely something supernatural in a sense. But there's still like a little demarcation of human effort because you're still uniting two things. When it comes to the 26, which is above even the higher unity, it means you're not talking about two things anymore. So it's a state of complete miracle which doesn't even take into account the notion of creation. It's something which creation has no reach on whatsoever, that there's going to suddenly be oil that burns when there's no oil to burn. So what does it mean? So above the higher unity, we kind of just spelled it out. It means you're not dealing with unifying anything anymore. Because even if you're talking about the higher unity, there's still a mention of existence there, right? Now hold on a second. We have a question here. This gets a little complicated also. He says, didn't we just say before that the 26th is specifically the Shem Havaya? So now we're putting Havaya with 26, this third level. But wait a second. When we were talking about Yichudi Ilah, the higher unity, it was also associated with the Shem Havaya, because we just got through saying Hashem Echad, right? Havaya Echad. We went through a whole thing that it's in the Shema. And therefore the higher unity is also connected with the Shem Havaya. Why only the 26th is associated with the Shem Havaya when the Shem Havaya is also associated with the 25th, which is Yichudi Ilah? And this is explained in many places. And let's go through it. What is explained in many places? That a bittul which comes primarily from the name Elokim, right? This is called bittul hayesh, which is called yichuda tata. Now, what is all those things, right? Bittul hayesh means what, Yisrael?
Bittul hayesh is like bittul of the self. It's like not the highest level, isn't it? So there's like also bittul mitzias.
Right. The best way to understand bittul hayesh is actually to look at it keneged bittul mitzias, right? Yeah. So what's the difference? Bittul hayesh basically is what we're saying. It's the same thing as yichuda tata. You are a yesh. You experience yourself. You can't get out of it. No matter how many hallucinogenic drugs you think you're going to take, you're going to mamish be pinching yourself, and you're going to be there, right? Yeah. You can't get out of yourself, right? But you can obey, and you can realize that you need to bend your will to the truth. And so basically, even upon doing that, and you act perfectly, it's only called bittul hayesh because you're just taking your yesh, which you're not getting rid of, and you're just aligning it with the higher realms. In other words, nature is preserved, but it's trying to direct itself towards godliness. And this, therefore, is called the lower unity, because you are unifying yourself with God, but in a way when the world is like staying strongly in its own self-awareness, but trying to obey Hashem, right? So that's the unified part. So we're saying that comes from the name Elokim. Why name Elokim? Because Elokim is essentially a name of God, which is also the gematria for Hateva, nature. But when nature is dressed up and playing the role of Elokim, nature is acting godly, right? In other words, nature is obeying. It's not just nature running off on its own, doing something which looks like it's the opposite of God and hiding God. Nature is, we're calling it out. You're nothing other than the name Elokim. You're also God. You think you exist, fine, but your existence is entirely bound up with and obeying the fact that you are called by the name of God. So it's called a unity, but it's a lower unity. Then you have what's called the yichudi ilah, which is called bittul b'metzias. What is bittul b'metzias? You get such an overpowering of godliness coming into your realm of nature that actually overtakes you, right? To the point that you no longer are aware of yourself. You don't pinch yourself and you're not there. Basically, God is talking through your mouth. Now, there is still some kind of a vessel there, but the idea is more that the vessel is not in possession of its own self-consciousness. Conscience. It doesn't know that it's there, right? Because the idea is that the Shem Havaya is at play. What is the Shem Havaya? Right? It's the notion of like something which is beyond nature, and it's making the unification from its standpoint, and therefore it sort of absorbs and overwhelms the feeling of self. And this is the idea of a miracle which is supernatural. They found the jar of oil. And this is also, but my point is, this is also associated with the Shem Havaya. So even the higher unity is connected with the Shem Havaya. And it's dafka from the standpoint of the Shem Havaya, which overtakes the name Elokim. Right? So then why are we saying that the Shem Havaya is specifically on the 26th? Right? Which is Gematria Havaya, when Yehuda Ilah, the higher unity, is on the 25th. And it clearly also requires Havaya to take over. Mikom Makom, because nonetheless, Zedek Asiv be Havaya Echad, V'lo Yachid, because when we say in the Shema, the Havaya of the Shema, the Yud Kei Vav Kei of the Shema, comes together with like a last name, which is Havaya Echad. And the idea is that it doesn't say there Havaya Yachid, like you learned in Hechaltzu. What's the difference in the meaning when you say Echad and Yachid? Echad is what's called Echad HaManoi. Whenever you're saying the word one, it does not mean the only one. It's one of a count. Echad, Shtayim, Shalosh. It's the way you demarcate one in a count of many. Right? So it means it's like a part of a plurality. It's just the one part. Whereas when you say Yachid, when you say person is serious like a Ben Yachid, he's the only son, it means that there's only one. It's not one of a count. It's the idea that there is nothing else. There's only one thing. The fact that it says in the Shema, which is supposed to be Yehuda Ilah, the higher unity, Hashem Echad, means that even though you're using the Shem Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei, but you're mentioning not that there's only one, you're mentioning a type of unification, which means there's two things. Yeshnam Zayin Rekim Ba'aretz V'Daled Ruchos HaOlam. There is the seven heavens and the earth and the four directions of the world. It's just that those things which are in existence are batul and united with the Ori and Sof, the Aleph, which is called the Alufo Shel Olam. So, answer your question 1 second. So the point is that even though you have a Shem Hashem going on there, it's obviously some kind of a lower level of the Shem Hashem, which still takes into account the existence of the other, but negates it, right? And nullifies it all inside of the higher unity. But the fact that you're even talking about unity means you're talking about two things, so it's not a level of Havaya which negates from the outset the very notion of two things, which would be if it said Hashem Yachid.
It's not true biddle.
Yeah.
What's that?
Not true biddle.
It's actually I would say it's true bittul, because even when you're going to mention bittul, you're already denoting that there's something that needs to be nullified, right? It's not true oneness, you could say, but it could be true bittul. Bittul Metzias is true bittul, right? You can't get more bittul than that. But the fact that you have to mevatel something means you're still having a conversation about two things that are unified, right? V'hulafi, the line starts shehavaya here, 4 lines from the bottom, the gimel. Hulafi shehavaya zeh hu havaya de hishtalshelus havaya de lasata, right? So we're getting a little bit granular here. And he says it's because the havaya of the Shema is called the havaya of the hishtalshelus, which is called the lower havaya. So what are we getting involved in over here, right? You now have a couple things on the table. You have the lower unity and the higher unity. And you also have the lower Havaya and the higher Havaya. But they're not the same thing.
It's just like negating the whole purpose of Havaya. Havaya is meant to be like the one. Like there's no like, and we're already starting to separate Havaya like this.
Because think about it, right? Think about it like this for a second, and I'll try to explain it. I always want to explain this, and there never comes the right time to do it, right? Havaya can be in a state where it is the one, right? Or what does it mean, Havaya of the Seder Ishtalshlus? It means like this. Yud Kei Vav Kei is really Atzilus Bri Yitzir Nasiya, right? That's what Yud Kei Vav Kei is. But if you're seeing Havaya streaming through the Shem Elokim, then what happens is when you're in Atzilus, you experience only the Yud. And when you're in Bria, you're experiencing only the Hey. And that's why you're suddenly like in your own dimension, even though you are being enlivened by the Shem Havaya. But because it's going through a filtering process, which is the name Elohim, therefore you don't get the whole Havaya at once, right? So when you're only getting a fraction of Havaya, that means that the idea of the unified Havaya, which is past, present, and future as one, and therefore negates everything, no, it's divided up. So you get past, present, future, and therefore it's like you get Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira. You're living only in like one dimension of the Shem Havaya. And therefore, that Shem Havaya if you're like, for example, in, let's say, Yetzira in that model, and you want to unite with Hashem, your best bet is uniting from a standpoint of the lower unity. Because you're fractured off in the Vav of Hashem's name. You can't connect with the other letters, but you know that you're part of something bigger, so you just like join yourself with a Bittul Hayesh to this greater quality by subduing your will to the truth, even though you don't see the truth. But if somehow the truth should emerge, which is that Yud Ke Vav Ke that's in the world should somehow like show itself, that would be called Yichudi Ilah. Right? Because the individual status of every single world would sort of dissipate and melt into the true reality that Atzilus, Bria, Yitzira, and Asiya are actually one continuous name, Havaya, and you're not lost in your little section of it. The Havaya like overtakes the rest of it, and all the creations in all those worlds become nullified to the Shem Havaya. That's called the higher level unity, right? But you're still dealing with Havaya of the Hishtalshlus. Because you're still talking about the Havaya as it comes down and expresses itself in the four worlds. It's just that in this case, the Havaya overtakes the four worlds, as opposed to the lower unity, when the four worlds are sort of overtaking Havaya, but they're trying to join with what they know as their source. What about the Havaya that exists before it dangles down to enliven Atzilus, Bria, Yitzira, and Asiya? It's like the source of Havaya before it enters into the conversation of being the generator of those four worlds. So we're not saying it's a different Havaya. We're saying it's like Havaya in its true source, because the Havaya that comes out is already a Havaya. Don't forget, we're going to see it in the Mimer. The word Havaya also means lahavot, right? Like he's havus, which means to bring into being. So the same word, which is like representing past, present, and future, and completely something beyond time and space, it's the same word for to bring into being. So it has an association, if it wants to, with the creation, and therefore it gets into this conversation of whether there's a unity of the creation and in two different ways. But it can also stand like on its own laurels, and it's not only there to enliven other things, it's just pure being in and of its own right, not to enliven another being. In which case that's called Havaya de Le'ela, the higher Havaya, which is already beyond the Havaya of the Seder Yishtal and we're saying that is the true Havaya, the 26th. Not the 25th, which is Havaya as it comes into this Hishtalshlus, but overtakes and nullifies the Hishtalshlus. You getting all that?
So,
any questions?
Can you please go over the last part again with regards to the level above Havaya as is engendered in
the Hishtalshlus.
Yes.
Well, we didn't talk about it too much yet, but basically this is right, like the name of God. It's very much like what we're talking about in the Mashiach class, right? There's an aspect of God which is Him before He even thought of the world, right? So even though Hashem also thinks of the world, and therefore there's like a source of the world inside of Hashem, right? There's also Hashem by Himself before He even thought of the world, and that Hashem has a name. Now He doesn't have to use His name, because the only time you need a name is in order to express yourself to another. But even when He's by Himself, He has that theoretical name. It's like it's the name for Him Himself, right? And that name is the Shem Havaya. So there's an aspect of godliness which precedes the Hishtalshlus. What's the Hishtalshlus? Hashem's basically enlivening and engendering creation. So when He expresses His name, when He says His name, so to speak, so now it's come out of Him. Now it's the name which is underlying the energy and enlivening creation. But before He says His name, before He even thinks of His name, before the name even comes up to His mind, it's in there in some essential way, because that is His name.
So this is higher than Atzmus. This is higher than Atik Yomin. This is higher.
Whoa. There's no such thing as higher than Atzmus.
Okay. So
right?
there's no such thing as
Atik Yomin.
So because what it sounds like to me is you're explaining Atik Yomin.
Yeah.
Atik Yomin is Hashem's expression in relation to Himself.
Yeah. I would say, like, let's say Panemius Atik, like we spoke about in the other mimer. Yeah.
Radla?
Yeah.
What's Getsonius Atik Yomin?
It's just called Atik, right? And we spoke about it in the in the previous member at great length. We said, they had the idea of Moshe, Shlomo, and Mashiach. Remember that whole thing? And like we spoke about it at great length, the difference of their effect on the world and their source and so forth, right?
But I didn't put down any terms. I just put down Ashirus as the actual like.
Arich, Atik, and Panemius Atik. These are called the three levels of the Kesser.
But Panemius Atik is Radla.
Yes.
But it didn't mention Radla in that Maimah.
Which one?
In the Maimah with Shlomo.
I think it actually did.
Did it?
It might have. Yeah, but it is the same thing. Yeah, it definitely did, because we were saying like Nimtza Nelam Mizgala. Remember that?
Yeah.
And the Nimtza he mentioned was the unknowable head. Yeah.
Yeah, but you never said the unknowable head is Radla. Like,
Well, that's the Radla it stands for Reisha de Lo Yis Yada.
oh,
It literally
that's
means
not
the
known.
unknowable head.
Oh.
That's what that is, Radla.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, so we did mention it.
We did.
I was just stupid. Okay.
I wouldn't go that far, but we mentioned it. Okay. In any case, what we've just cracked open here is that you have Yehuda Tata, Shem Elokim, Yehuda Ilah, Shem Havaya, but the lower Shem Havaya. And then you have something which is beyond Yehuda Ilah, which is the higher Shem Havaya, and that goes on 24th, 25th, and 26th of Hanukkah.
We're talking
Right.
to Hashem, Hashem's talking to us, Hashem's talking to himself.
Basically, yeah, something like that, right? Now,
No, just Hashem's talking.
I think this is a good place for us to stop for today. Actually, we're out of time and
Okay.
we're there. Okay, good enough.
Can you say one word to get us like hooked? One word.
Radla.
Okay.
Thank you, Ross.
Okay, guys.